I was born on August the 16th, 1949 here in Fairhope. I'm a Fairhope local. I was born at the Jordan Clinic, and the Jordan Clinic at that time was down on the beach in Fairhope. My family came to Fairhope when my father came here in 1947, may have been 48, to work at the Auburn Agricultural Experimental Station, and that's where I grew up. That was a great place to grow up. We had lots of facility, a lot of things to work with, and then we were intellectually inspired by college professors and agricultural research and high academic kind of projects going on. New inventions, new crops, different milking machines and stuff was always in front of us, and it was a great place to grow up. In Fairhope, I've had several projects. I was known here in the 70s and 80s for painting Egyptian wall paintings, and I've done a lot of sculpture, and there's still a lot of pieces of my limestone floating around that I did Egyptian sculpture. By 1984, I started doing Civil War reenacting, and I became the leader of the Civil War reenactors that we did a lot of Civil War reenactment events here, and I made them up. I just made them up. I wrote scripts. I costumed people, got people going in one direction. We just make up events, and we would do surrenders, and we would do all kinds of things related to wars, and we would benefit battlefields and parks and make them thousands of dollars. So we got to be well known in these battlefields and parks. One of them we did was Fort Mims. When I did the first reenactment of Fort Mims, it was a garbage dump with refrigerators and hot water heaters and things like that all over, and we actually moved the hot water heaters and stuff back and had a little bit of a reenactment there. Now it is a very benefited park, and it all came about because of the reenactments that they happened there. This year, in fact, this weekend, is the 199th. Next year is the 200th, and I'll probably go take part in that. But I felt very good about working and building up that park. I kind of quit the reenactments about 2000. It got to be I got to be too old to sleep on the ground. Got to be kind of hard to do, and also reenactors got kind of fragmented. It was mostly the Civil War, the Confederate flag problem, and you started getting all these Confederate flag people on one side and all these researched, academically polished historians on the other, and it just fragmented the whole hobby, which just has pretty much in the South completely fallen apart. Another thing I did by the 1990s, I started doing archaeological preservation. I was on the Baldwin County Archaeological Preservation Committee, and we went around saving things. It got to be where we didn't need the commissioners to do it. We got to know lawyers, we got to know law, we got to know planning and zoning. We know how to throw logs in front of people. And back then, historic preservation wasn't pleasant, and you didn't try an appeal to a developer. You just got in his hair. You got in front of his bulldozer, and you used laws and stuff to stop him. And so all the developers knew who I were. I'd say there were, I think, 9 or 11 Indian mound systems that I just about totally stopped development on myself. One of the most important archaeological preservation effort of mine was the original Spanish fort in Spanish Fort. It was destined to be the end of a cul-de-sac. They were going to use the dirt in the fort walls to help build the road with, and I actually tripped that development up. And today, the Spanish fort still stands in a large, pristine area. And if it wasn't for me, really single-handedly, that would have gone away. So I was very proud of doing that. Another one I did was Blakely. Blakely was in international paper land, the battlefield part, most of the heavy trenches and readouts. About 4 through 8 were in international paper land, and the attentions that I brought to it had them donate that land to the park. And I'm afraid I was very influential in having that happen. And the Redoubt 4, which was rebuilt in a very archaeological sensitive manner, was directed by me, and I'm real proud of that. During these times, I'd started in about 1992 with the Fairhope Museum. I had already built two museums down on Dauphin Island, and then I'd help. This was the fourth one when I started the Fairhope Museum. I didn't know they had started, and when it started, they had all the little old ladies and men had gotten in fights, and they were all started going away. So I helped organize the first Fairhope Museum with Flo Simmons, and there were other people that were involved too, but it was really Flo Simmons and myself that built the museum, and that has worked real well. Today, the Fairhope Museum. It was a Fairhope Historical Museum, and then we donated that to the city, and now it's a Fairhope Museum of History. This museum is extremely effective. It is working really good, and I'm bathed in compliments, I call it, with being very successful. I thought I was going to be run out of town. I didn't know it was going to work so well, but the Fairhope Museum has worked really well. It's going to be a real feather in my cap. Let's see, another thing I do is I collect and propagate water plants, collect exotic fowl. I have right now about 25 peacocks. I had coyotes kill 17 of my exotic turkeys. I had these New Zealand turkeys, and quite a flock of them. I was real proud of them. They're my babies, and boy, they got slaughtered all at one time. You should have seen the head and the feet and the tails and the butts and the guts slung out all over the fields around my house. It wasn't pretty. And also I have a tea farm. I have the only tea farm in the southern part of the United States. I've got these in 1979 from the Auburn Agricultural Experimental Station. I took 3 of the original Japanese hybrids and bred them together to form my own hybrid, which I named Camellia sinensis Fairhope. I've named it after Fairhope. And now I have at least 40,000 of these bushes growing in fields. And I find out that there's not anybody else around the United States outside of North Carolina who say they're the only one who's really doing this. I'm one of the largest tea farmers in the United States. I'm in regular communication with people around this country about tea. And right now, the University of South Carolina is doing a study on me. Right now, Auburn University is, they're doing an extension program where I've given them now lots of my tea plants. They are growing and mass producing them, and they're going to extend to people to be able to grow your own tea at home, which is quite nice. And what I'm going to do is divulge how to make tea. It took me years and years and years of plagiarizing and copying other people to find out how to make tea. I had to go to China. I've been in and out of China 3 times, and the Chinese really told me how to make tea. And then after they told me how to make it, it was 10 years where I really made a good cup of tea. And now I make really exotic teas. I can really make a real fine tea product, which I have tea technicians from around the country who testify that I make real good tea. So that's going to be my claim to fame, I think. They'll probably plant a tea bush on my grave, and I'll probably be buried up there in Montrose. I wish I could be buried in Fairhope, but I'm not going to be. I'm going to be buried in Montrose, since you can't be buried in a Fairhope single tax colony unless you're a Fairhope single taxer, which I'm not. I'm a supporter of, but I'm not a single taxer. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
My name is Henry Crawford, and I'm here today basically because my great-grandfather was E.B. Gaston, one of the founders of Fairhope. So my family's been involved with Fairhope since the founding. My grandmother Crawford was a publisher and editor of the Fairhope Courier for approximately 50 years, and was very instrumental in the community of Fairhope herself. My grandfather, Henry Crawford Sr., was very involved in the Fairhope community. It was president of the Bank of Fairhope at one time, and owned a big dry goods store here in Fairhope also. My father, Henry Crawford, was in the grocery business. Well, he actually started in working for the Fairhope Courier, and then he went in the grocery business, and then he went in the beer business. And I followed him, and also went in the beer business, and stayed in the beer business most of my adult life. So our family's been here in Fairhope since the beginning, and we consider it as ideal a place as any place we've been, and we haven't really lived anyplace else, so we don't can't make a fair comparison, but we're pretty confident that Fairhope's as good as it gets. Thank you. That's about all I have.
Can I ask you, I
Yeah.
don't normally ask follow-up
That's
questions,
fine.
but because your grandfather is E.B. Gaston,
Mhm.
I just would be interested to know, to what extent, when you were growing up,
Mhm.
did your family relate to that single tax philosophy history, or did you still feel sort of an idealism that was connected to that, or a belief system, or was that sort of not so much?
I'm a member of the Fairhope Single Tax Colony, and I took that course to be a member. That's what you have to do. I think by the time I was growing up, the single tax principle had just about slipped away in a sense that because of income tax and other taxes, it wasn't as idealistic and the only tax that had been initiated to be in the beginning. But the Fairhope Single Tax Colony was still a vibrant part of the community and still is today. So that's one of the things I think that makes Fairhope different, is the fact that it does have a single tax colony that owns a lot of property and tries to benefit the citizens and the town with parks and things that it wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful heritage when you look at it.
I am Jennifer Fidler, and my dad's people came from Czechoslovakia here in the 30s. My grandmother lived on a farm in Wisconsin and milked cows and tended to cattle, and she's written a story. It's entitled "They Wait for Me," and in it talks about their sleigh rides in Wisconsin. Her brother lived here in Baldwin County on the end of Fairhope Avenue. His name was John Novak, and he lived down here, and talked to them about the warm weather, and they decided to move down here, her parents and she and her husband, to experience the warmer weather. My grandmother's father had rheumatoid arthritis, and they felt like that may help his health. So the two families moved down. It took them over a week or so because she was pregnant with my aunt, who was 86 when she died just 2 or 3 weeks ago. So they were here for 86 years and just farmed on the end of Fairhope Avenue. They lived catty corner from each other, and her daddy gave her some land that she built a homestead on the road called Bohemian Hall Road. And on that road, the Bohemian Hall Road, there was a hall that the Czechoslovakian people built in that area. And the hall was used to school the children, the Czechoslovakian children, and to learn the Czech language, and to have social functions and weddings and that sort of thing for the community. So it was moved in town in the later years once the public schools were developed and the schools were developed, and there were other social halls to have social functions, and homes became bigger. But the hall was hit by a tornado this past March 2011. And so I'm on the committee to help restore the little Bohemian Hall. It's located in downtown Silver Hill. My mom's people, my mom was a bishop, so they actually came on the original wagon train down from, I believe it was Marengo County, and originally from Cataract County, North Carolina, and they came to settle the area. So it was very lonely for the first people that came here, and they had children. And my great-great-grandfather is William Morgan Bishop. He had a homestead in the Barnwell community where Oak Hollow Farms is located, and he also had a homestead on Red Barn Road, which is off Clay City Road, Highway 33 in Fairhope. And he was my great-grandfather. Noah Bishop was my great-grandfather, who's my great-great-grandfather. William Morgan Bishop was my great-great-grandfather. I'm not sure why they chose Alabama. I mean, I guess it was just that the Bishop side probably just to come to farm in a new life and new experiences. Later generations of the Bishops, they mostly farmed. Of course, now I grew up on a farm, so my mom and dad families both farmed, and so they stayed in that line of work. In the 80s, we lost a lot of farmers due to just the economy and the times in the 80s. So there were a lot of farmers in the Silver Hill area that the left in our family actually were the last farmers in Silver Hill to continue on our heritage. How typical would I regard my family's journey? I guess it would be just as typical as, anybody that's looking for a better life. And I think that that's probably why many people came not only to America, but they moved around just to have a better quality of life. So when we think about other immigrants coming to the United States, it's almost always to better their life. And most of them are hard workers, because in America we can work and prove ourselves and work and make a living. And we can use those earnings to create a better life for ourselves. And so when we think about the new people coming in, I think it's part of the American way, to work to better ourselves. So I'm somewhat positive about some of our immigrants moving in, as long as they're legal and pay their taxes and contribute to our American economy. And that's all.
I'm Lucille Fracas, and I came to Alabama about 32 years ago. And we were looking for a place to retire where there was not cold weather. And actually, we read about Fairhope in a book. My husband was retired, and I went to work in retail. And I have 2 children, only one of which lives here. The oldest one, my son, has never lived in Fairhope, but comes down often to visit and loves it. I think that's it.
Officially, I'm Rusty Godard. More officially, I'm Claude George Godard III. My grandfather was a local doctor here that moved in the late teens, early 20s. One of the 2 doctors in town for many years. My other grandfather owned and operated with his sister the Fairhope Courier, which they inherited from their father, E.B. Gaston. I have great memories of growing up in Fairhope and my life here. Wednesday night at the Courier was like family night. You'd go help get the paper put together, folded, get it ready to go out, because the paper went out on Thursdays. So we'd all show up and help do what we could do, even as children. It's always a lot of fun, something I look forward to. On school nights, it was cut back. But even on school nights, if there was a big issue, we'd all get there. So we had a great time. Both of my grandparents lived on the water, so growing up, I had the best of everything. They had porches we could sleep on. We'd sleep on porches, look for jubilees, find jubilees, gig flounders, catch crabs, shrimp, soft shells, whatever we could find. It was a great life and a great time. I learned to be in boats, sailboats, motorboats, had boats to play with as a kid. Loved to sail. That became my sport and my passion. I sailed from probably about 8 or 9 years old with a styrofoam sailboat till I joined the Junior Yacht Club at 12 and moved up to the fish class boats. And from then on, life just took a hold of sailing. I finally sold my last sailboat about 1.5 years ago, and I still miss it. I guess that's what we have in life. The Gastons were part of the founders of Fairhope. Some say he was the ringleader, others not. It doesn't matter. He was one of them. His in-laws came with him, and so did many others. They found an area they liked that was good for growing, good crops, good for forestry, good for wood for homes, and they settled it. It had already been settled before. There were people around, but they put an organization to Fairhope. They had a town, and it worked very well, turned out very well nowadays. Much of what we have is due to the single tax. The beaches, the parks, they did many great things without thinking of themselves individually, but as a group. Get that one. Generations have stayed here. The Godard side of my family came from France to New Orleans to Mobile. And my grandfather was the one that immigrated out of Mobile after finishing medical school in Mobile. It was a branch of South Alabama at the time. I can remember the stories about he had to walk to school, and they lived on the other side of town. And in Mobile, that was a long walk for him. I can remember walking to school, but it wasn't but a couple of blocks. I talk to my grandchildren now about walking to school back in those days, and they look at me like I'm crazy. You get in a car to go anywhere, you don't walk. Why did they settle here? All of my family has stayed here, except for my sister. She moved away, but everybody else has stayed and grown up in this area. I grew up with great uncles, great aunts, as being part of the family. We'd get together as holidays. I just can't say how good my life was. And it might have taken me a few years to know that. In the early years, you thought about Fairhope, well, it didn't have a movie theater anymore, and it didn't have this, and didn't have that, and you had to go to Mobile for this, Mobile for that. Nowadays, we have it all. It's still very nice. I can't imagine ever living somewhere else. I think about going to the mountains when it gets hot, but other than that, this is my home, this is my life. I love it very much. I can't think of else I want to say.
My name is Thelma Janice Todd. My maiden name was Thelma Young. My father was the youngest of 10 children, born to Carrie Young, Louis Young, and Peter Young. 5 girls and 5 boys. I grew up here. I'm a child of the 50s, and so I read about like the civil rights, even though I didn't participate because I was young. But that was during the time of a lot of civil rights demonstrations and marches. My relatives on the Young, the Lewises, were here in the 1860s. And at the time, it was not even known, the city was not known as Fairhope. It was known as Baldwin City or Slaughter Pasture. It was not until the single tax colony, people from, I think it's Iowa, came in the 1900s. So the Lewises came up to Fairhope from Mississippi. And from what I've gathered is after slavery, a lot of people came to this part of Alabama because of the water. It was on a bluff, and the soil was good for farming. And they contacted people they knew still in Mississippi. So a lot of people came to this part of Alabama from Mississippi. A book was done on my great-great-great-grandmother called Nancy Lewis, and it's in Paul Gaston's book, The 10 Women of Fairhope. And he was doing research on his grandfather, and he kept coming across the name of Nancy Lewis. And so in his article, in his piece, this was a time when the single tax colony got here, and they were basing that on no matter what your color, your creed, race, whatever was, you would be brought into the single tax colony. Because my great-great-grandmother, Nancy Lewis, they had property, and from what I've been told through the family history, the property was here in town, in Fairhope. Exactly where, I don't know. But when the gentleman died that she was buying the property from, according to family history, not according to the single tax colony history, they paid her, when the gentleman died, his heirs gave her $200, said they didn't find a deed, so she had to vacate the property, so they gave her $200, according to Paul Gaston's book. And she and another relative on the Young side, Parker Young, they went, and because Mr. Gaston told them that there was some property for sale, I think he felt bad because they couldn't be a part of the single tax colony. And so they went and they bought land, and according to him, the statement made by Nancy Lewis was that we have a deed now. I enjoyed my time growing up here. It was during the time of segregation, but we had excellent teachers. One of my favorite, Mrs. Bosby, Anna Bosby, and we got really good basic education. We were taught about Shakespeare, Chaucer. So when I graduated from high school and I went to college in Connecticut, I stayed with an uncle, I was not behind. A lot of people think that if you were black and during that time you got an education, it was an inferior education. But we really got a great education from our school system here. We had to bypass the Fairhope High School, this was during the late 50s, early 60s, and go to high school in Daphne, Baldwin County Training School. We have the committee, because that school is no longer in existence. It's now, I think, an intermediate school, but the superintendent, of the school system, gave the home ec building to the Baldwin County Training School Heritage Fest Foundation, and so they made a museum. It's on the main street in Daphne, and it's the Heritage Black Education Museum. I graduated and went away and went to Connecticut, and then from Connecticut I went to Philadelphia, and then from Philadelphia I moved to Newark, New Jersey, and got my bachelor's at Rutgers University, and got my master's in library science from Columbia University. But I always knew that once I retired that I would be coming back to Fairhope. It's a place that I love, and I enjoy being back here. My education is in library science, and I worked at the Library of Congress for a lot of years until I retired in 2006. On my mom's side, the Saffords, they came, I think, from Fruitdale and Citronelle and some other places. My grandfather, wherever there was turpentine, that's what he did. But they finally settled here in Fairhope. I was born 46, so my mom was young. So I'm thinking it was the late 20s, early 30s that they settled here. And so I have relatives on the Lewises, the Youngs, and the Saffords that are still living here. Quite natural, you know, it's when they have children, like I did, you go away to college and you might go somewhere else, but we always find a way to come back home, and there's always visits, either Christmas or during the summer, coming back home. So Fairhope is a place that I am glad to be back here. I retired in 2006, and I retired in January, and in March I was on my way here. And so I've been here, been involved with a lot of volunteer things, but like I say, I'm glad to be home. I'm finished.
My name is Carrie Powell. I was born here in Fairhope on May 14, 1985. My parents moved here in the 70s for job purposes and also my mother's family had moved here back in, I think, the 60s. And that's a big reason why they ended up choosing Alabama. They looked at a couple of other places, but because her family was here, that's why they decided to come. My mother's a physical therapist, and she was having trouble finding jobs in Texas, and my dad he created a table company that he moved here that wasn't doing so well in Texas either. So it ended up booming after they got here. Why did they settle here and not move elsewhere? Family reasons. They did stay as they first started in Mobile and then ended up transferring over here into Fairhope. Probably later in the 70s, probably about 78 is when they got to Fairhope. Would you regard your family's journey? This is a typical way of families moving around in the country. You know, if they need business, they'll end up moving wherever they can go to get, you know, the money to raise their family and be able to give them a proper life and everything. So as far as, you know, how does it mirrors most experiences of Americans and their lifestyles. They're always having to, you know, get up and move. I think it's also a natural instinct for people to want to get out there and see different things, different places, different environments, and experience different things. This is probably a real typical thing for most families, and especially beginning families. Recent Alabama immigrants. I really don't have an opinion about more recent Alabama. These especially those who arrive in Central and South America. Along with yours, and what is different? You know, there's really not much difference. Even people in other countries, you know, they're doing the same thing. They're looking out for their family. They're wanting the adventure. They're wanting journeys. They're wanting to have, you know, something to tell their future generations, you know. And I think that's a big part of the whole moving and experiencing things. So really, you know, everyone branches out in some way, you know, whether it's just a visitation or an immigration, but I think they're all just, you know, it all boils down to being the same thing. So that's it.